So the carbon cycle. Part of the most important thing to learn about the cycles is the compounds that are involved in the cycle, and you have to be able to recognize them chemically, and you have to be able to recognize their name, okay? So in the carbon cycle, there's one compound that we could say mainly cycles throughout the cycle. Anybody know what it is?
Carbon.
What kind of carbon? Carbon dioxide. So there's others, okay? But the process of carbon dioxide coming in and out of living things and layers of earth is how we primarily reference the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle will travel through the biosphere, which means it travels through what? Say it. If I say it travels through the biosphere, it means it travels through what?
The troposphere.
Think of the layers of earth. I will pause. So yes, the biosphere is where life exists on all layers of earth. Name me the 3 layers of earth.
The
Geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere. So carbon dioxide, or the carbon in some form, is going to travel through all layers of earth and life. That's what I mean by carbon travels through the biosphere. You need to know that because there's going to be one cycle that does not. So how does it get into the atmosphere? And again, remember, the cycle can start anywhere. I'm starting this way. How does carbon go into the atmosphere? You already learned one way when we did the birth of Earth. How did it get into the atmosphere? Volcanic eruptions. Good. Volcanic eruptions put carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. What else? You also learn in Unit 1 that something puts a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Burning of fossil fuels. Good job. Fossil fuel. Break down that word for me. What does that mean, to be a fossil fuel? Your fuel that exists from what?
Fossil.
Which means what?
Minerals.
Something underground? Fossil means something underground? What does fossil mean?
Dinosaurs.
Keep going. Remains of a living thing. So fossil fuels literally were once living things that, yes, they're underground, and we burn them to produce energy. So any living thing that decays or burns, so organic matter is living matter, or could be dead, obviously, but it's made up of CHON PS, is going to produce carbon into the atmosphere. What else you learned in bio produces carbon dioxide? Bless you. What? How? Not only humans, every little thing that, yes, breathes out, produces carbon dioxide. And then I want you to keep in mind that oceans literally will just release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Kind of like water vapor, but they release the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So atmospheric carbon can either enter an ocean. So once I put carbon dioxide in my atmosphere, it can either enter the ocean, it literally will dissolve into the ocean, or it can enter what? What do we know carbon dioxide enters? Plants. Good. What's that process called when carbon dioxide enters plants? Photosynthesis. So I'm going to go this way on this slide, okay? Yes, I'm in the ocean. You see the ocean? And then we'll go to the next slide and we'll go inside a plant. So when carbon dioxide dissolves into the ocean, so here's my carbon dioxide, it dissolved into the ocean, it's going to react with this right here. What's this called? Calcium. And it's going to form this. What's this called? Nope. Good. Calcium carbonate. Anybody know what calcium carbonate forms? Let's say you don't. If you look at the pictures, it'll tell you. Shells. What else? Rocks or bones, right? Because think of calcium as your bones, right? You need calcium to keep your bones strong. And then after time, this rock will form limestone, which is going to be a huge component of environmental science. Because when carbon goes through this process and turns into limestone, it's literally going to be trapped in the cycle. So we kind of lost that carbon in that rock until a lot happens for it to come back into the cycle. Carbon enters the biosphere, which means living things, right? Which we know are plants, or any bacteria that can also take in. So any autotroph, let's say, right? Because it could be bacteria, it could be plants, it could be protists, plant-like protists. They're going to go through a process called photosynthesis. This is the one reaction in science you have to know. So we know carbon dioxide is going to come in. What does it react with? Give me water. Good job. And light. And it makes sugar. What kind of sugar? Glucose, which is C6H12O6. So here's my other carbon compound of the carbon cycle, yes? And what else does it make? Oxygen, what we breathe. Talk about why you study plants over and over again. They produce the food you eat and the compound you need to breathe. Very important. Glucose is inside the plant, and then the food chain begins. An organism will eat the plant, another will eat, and blah, 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 and that compound gets transferred from one organism to another. And then when the animal excretes waste, or does what? Or the plant, I should say. Animal or plant. Add the word plant there. Excretes waste. Plants don't excrete waste, but they can what? How do you think the carbon's going to get back in the cycle? What? How? What has to happen to the plant or the animal besides waste? Die. That's true. Then decomposers are going to return the carbon dioxide back to the cycle. So phosphorus, it mainly circulates as, if you look at the picture, what do you see there? What compound of phosphorus? Phosphate, good. PO4, okay? Mainly circulates as phosphate. If you don't know that PO4 is phosphate, write that down. Now look at the picture. Where does phosphorus never go through? So where all of my cycles go through all layers of Earth, phosphorus does not. Where does it not travel through? Yes, it travels through living things, because you see the word decomposition, that tells you living things will go into play somewhere in the phosphorus cycle. Look at the picture. Look at phosphorus cycling. You see the cycle of phosphorus here. You see the cycle of phosphorus here. Where is it not going through? Which would be where? Atmosphere. Phosphorus does not ever travel through the atmosphere, which means when you burn organic matter, every compound in CHON PS will travel to the atmosphere except P. P will end up in the hydrosphere or the geosphere, never enters the atmosphere. It's mainly stored in the geosphere. So if ever you're asked a question like, where is most nitrogen? What are you going to pick? Geosphere. No. Nitrogen. Atmosphere. Where's more phosphorus? Geosphere. Okay, so think of those things. It's in the geosphere, and it's mainly stored in rocks, soil. And then I also want you to start to put together that phosphorus makes up fertilizer. That's really important because that's a big unit in environmental science. So naturally in rocks and soil and fertilizer, which forms naturally through the decomposition of organisms, but fertilizer we add in the agricultural society is going to have high levels of phosphorus. Or phosphate, I should say. So how does phosphate break down from rocks? What's happening here? What's that process called? Anybody know the word? Eroding. It's kind of like eroding, but eroding actually means the wearing away of land. So if we're wearing away rock, and what's happening in this picture? What do you see happening? Weathering. Good job. Breaking down of rocks. Phosphate comes out and it can enter obviously the hydrosphere or the geosphere. And weathering, if you need to define that, it happens through wind and water breaking down rock. So there's no definition for that here, but you can add it. So wind and water break down rock, and then our phosphate will enter the geosphere or the hydrosphere. What happens next? Look at the picture. Anybody know? And this is always what happens next. Once phosphate is in the soil or in the water, who's going to take it in? Yes, it's always plants, or let's say autotrophs is another word. They're going to take it in as phosphate from the soil, and then the same thing as carbon. The food chain begins, organisms produce waste or die, and decomposers break down the phosphate back to the cycle.